Morning, everyone. Okay. All right. Firstly, it's great to see Malachi up the front today. So hopefully that's the first of many occasions. I'm not sure if the beard had anything to do with it, but keep up the good work. Recently, I've been looking at the nature of God, and recently, especially how we can rely on God in our times of trouble. And recently, having gone through a challenging season in life, what I've focused on is sometimes it's easier to be able to say that than it is to actually be able to do that. And so I'd start with this story. A young lady was driving her car before she crashed and was flung over the side of a cliff. Unfortunately, she managed to grasp onto a branch and was hanging on for dear life, preventing her from a deadly fall. In a panic, she calls out, "Is anybody up there? Throw down a rope." And a booming voice replies, "This is God. Let go of the branch." The lady pauses and thinks for a moment before calling out, "Is there anybody else up there?" Preferably with a rope. And that's a sort of like a joking example, but a more, I suppose, pragmatic way of looking at it is, imagine you're the chief of a small village and your village is constantly being raided by a group of about 100 marauding raiders. And that village chief pledges allegiance to a strong king with a standing army of 5,000 troops in exchange for a promise that that king will protect his village. And the village chief gets intelligence that the invading forces are arriving in 2 weeks. And he sends a message to the king and says, "Send reinforcements to protect the village." And so the question is, to what extent is the village chief anxious or stressed out about those invading forces on his village? And the answer is, to the extent he has faith or lack thereof in the king's promise, that's the extent to which he'll be stressed or anxious. And so we all have stresses and anxiety in our life, but we wouldn't swap our troubles with anyone else. And psychologically, we can actually bear quite a lot of burdens if we just keep chipping away at things one at a time and keep checking off that to-do list. But it's when the burdens are so great that it seems like you're trying to bail out the Titanic with a teaspoon. You know, no matter what you do, the problems just seem to keep compounding and building. And it's in moments like those where people tend to give into their problems and it takes over their well-being and the way they think and their lifestyle. And no doubt we've all had moments like that in our lives. You know, we think about our careers, our work, financial pressures, relationships, our health. And when you think about our prayer lists, they're very long indeed, and they are continual. So the question is, how do we all cope with that? And growing up, my family would tell you that I was a bit of a worrier, a panic merchant. That's what my dad would call me, someone to easily worry about things. But what I would tell you is that I'm a planner. I don't like unexpected surprises. And if you think about when you go on holiday, there's 2 types of people. There's people who tend to plan everything down to the last detail, and there's people who just turn up and wing it and want to have a good time. And I'm very much in the make an itinerary sort of person. And I know that to be true because at the start of my career, that there was extensive psychological testing. So at the ATO, I found out I had a very rare personality type. And basically what they found was that I'm very circumspect. I look at things from 500 different angles before making a decision, which is great for that environment because you need to be very strategic because it's very adversarial. If you don't plan, you're going to lose the battle. In another career, I was considering was in investment banking. And I actually basically got the job, but I failed the psychological test at the end, not because I was crazy or a nut, but what I found out later was what they were testing was your breaking point. How much can you take before you snap? And my breaking point wasn't high enough to be in that field. So in recent times, like I said, I went through one of my toughest seasons in life, and what was happening was my plans made perfect sense to me. My medium to long-term goals were well established, and it should have been just as easy as reaching out and grabbing it, taking what was rightfully mine, basically. Yet despite my best efforts, that always seemed to elude me. I couldn't understand it. Nobody else could really understand it. It was just something that wasn't happening. So I doubled down and I kept redoubling down. And what that led to was annoyance. And that annoyance became frustration. That frustration became stress. Then my sleep suffered. My health suffered. My mood and attitude changed. My relationships with people changed. And the way I started to look at life changed. And I thought to myself, why is it that what I've so meticulously planned, I've worked so hard for it, and don't get me wrong, I was praying, okay? Continually prayed for it, and it just wasn't happening. And what I did was I decided to just take a break, step away from everything, took my long service leave for about a year. And after I stepped away, you have the time to look at things and reflect on what was happening. Because what happens is when you're busy in life and all these stresses come, it's like you're in the middle of the forest, but you can't see the forest because all you can see is trees. Okay, so when you're in the forest, you don't see the forest, you see the tree that's right in front of you. And when you go through dark or tough times, you start to look at the bigger picture. Instead of being in the forest looking at the tree, you take a drone and you look down on the forest itself so you can see the bigger picture. And of course, what is the bigger picture? It always starts and ends with God. So when I step back and look at the bigger picture, for the first time in a long time, the anxiety around those longer term plans no longer really concern me. Because you're praying differently. You prayed as if your life depended on it. You let go. Something you've been working towards for, decade and a half. I can let go of. And so something I've been so focused on striving towards, I just thought to myself, maybe God doesn't want me to do that. If that's not God's will for me, well, I'll hand those concerns over to God. And yes, new pathways opened up and it was very clear. And despite that, my work colleagues thought I was absolutely crazy because my decision to abandon that goal when it seemed so close at hand, did it make any financial sense? Did it make any logical sense to them? But all my cares at the time were cast upon God, and I knew I was doing the right thing. And it gave me newfound faith and courage in a sense that I'd never known before. And what I realized was that to have faith is one thing, but when you put your faith to the test, it really is quite another. And the point here is when we can rely on God, you have to let go of control. And letting go of control is not easy. It's a bit like the lady hanging onto that branch. Okay, it's very hard to let go of the branch. Anyone who's taught a learner driver, apparently I'm not the best person to be tutoring a learner driver because I'm reaching for the imaginary brake pedal and steering wheel. So yeah, I'm not the best person for that, but that's what happens when you don't have control of the car. Okay. In quicksand, people will tell you, don't panic. But I can tell you, if you fall into quicksand, the first thing you're going to do is start panicking, because that's